is the principal of project sales at the lighting rep agency, The Lighting Project, where she applies her expertise in strategic problem solving, operational management, and leadership development to drive successful outcomes. Passionate about innovation and strategy, she plays a key role in delivering high-quality projects tailored to client needs. This photo is of the Ritz-Carlton PDX, where Megan learned a lot and made some great relationships. Next, we have Alex Ridley. He is an electrical engineer and a senior associate at DLR Group with nearly 15 years of experience. His portfolio includes designs for a wide variety of public and private project types, a true integrated design engineer. Alex understands that the human experience is as important to the project as the engineering behind the scenes. This image is of DLR Group's design for the Riley Hills Elementary School. The design incorporates private classroom areas with access to outdoor spaces, specialized learning environments, and natural daylight to promote social and emotional well-being for the students and the educators. Next up is Paul with Berg Electric. Paul is an electrical contractor, and he started his career at Berg 17 years ago. He doesn't look that old though, you know. He manages pre-construction team for the Berg offices in Portland, Seattle, and Eastern Washington. So he's in the car a lot. He's a graduate of Oregon State mechanical engineering program. He has a particular passion for design build and design assist projects and is constantly seeking to innovate and evolve the process. This photo is of the University of Oregon's Matthew Knight Arena. This is one of the first projects that he ever worked on, and still to this day represents a significant achievement for both him and Berg Electric. Sammy is an interior designer with DLR Group with a diverse design experience ranging from higher ed, K through 12, civic, workplace, transportation projects. So she is doing a lot with prior education and practice in architecture and urban design. Sammy works to integrate all aspects of the built environment from the macro to the micro scales. She focuses on designing for those with neurodivergence and creating sensory-informed, research-based interiors. I just think that's amazing. These photos are a variety of furniture prototypes handcrafted by Sammy that explore neuro-inclusive design strategies for interiors. The pieces incorporate a variety of sensory-informed treatment modularities for those with autism and ADHD. All right, I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to say yes. And hopefully everyone can see me and all our panelists. And I'm going to ask some questions. So I need to get the right.
Can we have everybody turn off video that's not on the panel? I have like 12 faces.
Wait 1 sec to get to my cheat sheet screen here so I can see what I am asking people. All right. So our first question is, can you describe a recent successful project? Let's see. And I'm gonna, no, I wonder why we're seeing Alyssa. Can you describe a recent successful project and what made it stick out in your mind? And I'm going to start with Megan to tell us about a successful project.
Awesome. Thanks, Eileen. Yeah, I mean, I think any successful project is really based in open and honest communication. Any project that I can point to that has been a great success, there was a lot of good communication from all parties. And recently we have been growing and expanding our relationships with each discipline involved in the process, and that really helps us just keep that communication strong and flowing in all directions. And it just helps immensely because everybody knows what everyone else is doing. What we do.
That sounds like a great strategy. So I feel like a lot of times we don't all know what we're doing. Chris, as our architect, what's a successful project?
I mean, Megan said a lot of good points that I would probably echo. I think coming at it from Kayleen, Sammy, Alex, and I's perspective too, working within an integrated firm, I think we have a lot less barriers to communication. And so we find ourselves talking with one another via Teams, Outlook a lot. A lot of internal meetings that happen, whether or not there's too many meetings or could be more meetings. It is always helpful having someone nearby and within pretty ease of access. Like I'm in Seattle, Alex, Sammy, and Kayleen are down in the Portland office, and we were working on the same project together for a couple of years, but you never really felt like you were 3.5 hours away. I think kind of leaning into the communication aspect of things just makes projects that much more successful and able to be more thought out and well communicated.
So next I'm gonna ask Paul as our contractor.
Yeah, I mean, the project that kind of brought a lot of this panel together was that Benton County project. I think that's who Kayleen messaged, basically, just that whole chain looking for panelists. But that project in particular, you know, what I felt like made that project such a success in our eyes was just the mutual respect that everybody had for their each individual roles. That's not something that happens on every project. You know, as a contractor, a lot of times I feel like, especially in type of a, say, a hard bid situation, the contractual obligations are kind of built to pit us against each other, which is not an ideal way to do anything, right? And I think that's really why design to build, design assist has become such a popular model for project delivery in recent years, is because it creates this kind of collaborative group where everybody can kind of see the project from their own perspective and bring those to the table, right? And that's a big thing. I mean, we threw, I think, over 200 fixtures in front of Kayleen to review as part of the VE process for Benton County. And, you know, to her credit, she came back with every single one. You know, she said whether it was approved or not, why she didn't like it. And it wasn't until I asked her that she said, yeah, that was a lot. You know what I mean? So that's a big thing for us, is just that mutual level of respect, you know, between us, you know, the engineer, Alex, he did a lot of things on the energy side that made this job easier for us. We were able to go with a wireless lighting control system on this project. And that's something that we've been pushing recently, because we're seeing the proof in the pudding, right? We're seeing the labor hours saved. We're seeing all those cut sheets that are published by the manufacturers actually have a little bit of truth to them when they say how much money you're going to save, you know? And so that's been a big thing, and getting their buy-in was absolutely critical, you know, to us saying, hey, we think this is going to save us labor, it'll save the project money, it should give the owner a lot of flexibility. And, you know, we went through that process, and they bought in, and they supported us, and that's what's going to go on the project. So just that mutual kind of collaborative respect piece, that's really for us what made the difference on Benton County.
Okay. So Alex, since you got mentioned in that, do you have a success story yourself, or something you want to add about the project that Paul was talking about?
Well, I think I'll shamelessly extend Paul and Chris's point. I think that, you know, again, I'm going to cite Benton County because it has, you know, it's head and shoulders among projects in my career that's just gone smoothly, if I had to think of it in one word, right? And, you know, I think a few of the things that paved that mutual respect that we built on and I apologize for my audio, I'm getting over a cold. But I think one of the things that helps build that mutual respect that makes a project like that so smooth was really, it's, you know, one factor: compromise. That's one thing I saw from every member of our team, and that includes our owner and our contractor. No one entity or system was sacred, and I think that's how projects should be, right? I think this is the first project in my whole career where it's like, oh crap, we're going to run into a beam here, you know? And at that point, I was shocked. We had to adjust structure to fit the systems going in under it. I've never had that happen before. You know, there's usually always one system, and I'm throwing structural under the bus here a little bit, but that couldn't compromise, right? We made it happen. The other factor that I think is really crucial to me that again helped Benton County go so smoothly was that each little entity on the project really focused, really tried hard, put a lot of energy into not working out of a silo. You know, as Kayleen mentioned, as Chris mentioned, as Paul mentioned, we're all meetings together, we're all talking to each other, we're all treating each other as peers. I
Great.
think it's really those two ingredients in the recipe that made it come together.
All right. Sammy, do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, I'll speak to a very specific example from Benton County, and it has a great example of lighting and interior integration, which is kind of a core component of our work here. So behind the judges podium, we designed a feature wall with multiple layers of solid surface cut to look like mountains. We had this idea and this vision. And each layer of solid surface was to be uplit from below with linear coving above. And so how do you figure that out? How do you make the construction drawings? So I worked hand in hand with Kayleen in person. We mocked up a little mock-up and created construction documents to achieve this design intent. And I think having Kayleen in-house and having our lighting support here to help work through these elements made a huge difference in being able to push this forward.
So, well, that is exciting. All right. So our next question is, what's the number one source of frustration? And how do you mitigate it? And I'm going to start with Kayleen on this one.
Number one, I think, gets swapped out with number two to number one to number three. You know how it is in a project, depending what's going on. I think for me, it really is the lack of communication. Everybody kind of has their idea of how soon to get back to someone on something, or what level of importance something might be. So I might think it's a 10 important. I need to know this right now, and say, you know, Paul, I'm throwing you under the bus, even though you didn't do this, but he might think it's a 2, right? And so on other projects, that's probably the hardest thing, is tackling the level of communication and the expectation and the perception of what that means. I mean, aside from that, of course, moved walls and ceilings and dark paint colors and our complete unawareness of when that happens, and then we're supposed to react suddenly. And so again, that does fall back to communication. I think every time that's my number one thing that I would say breaks or makes. And this might be a theme as we see the hour go along, but for me, yeah.
Okay. Well, since you mentioned Sammy and dark interiors,
Oops.
what's what's your number one source of frustration?
I would say, as an interior designer, my number one source of frustration is when clients, owners, or other disciplines are only concerned with cost to the point of greatly affecting user experience or program usability. And this can be really difficult to mitigate, but I think involving a large range of users early on to give input on spatial needs, clearly recording this information, I think that can help to make a case moving forward to not remove these programmatic elements.
Right. And Chris, do you have something to add?
I echo what Kayleen and Sammy said. I guess the only other frustration that I could see is when people don't kind of mutually agree that we're all in this together within the project. I don't think we had that problem with the project we've been talking about, but there are projects sometimes where certain areas of the project team kind of miss that communication aspect with other disciplines within the team. But when we kind of approach it holistically and we're all in this together and kind of hold everyone's opinion in the process at the same level, I think that's what makes it the most successful. And so mitigating that through making sure that everyone feels like they have a voice and an opinion to offer in the design process, whether or not it's lighting, interior selections, where certain things might want to be placed throughout the building. I think all of that's part of the process, and making sure everyone's voice is valued only helps that.
Okay, so Paul, as the contractor, and in your bio, you said you like design assist. Do you want to talk a little bit about frustrations you've had on projects where you are sort of seen as like, we all go, oh, the contractor's gonna mess this up, or, hold us.
What a
our feet to
setup,
the
man.
fire.
Just teed me up there. I do have something that's a little different. For me, my number one frustration is it's time. That's the biggest thing for me. I mean, I think all of us on this panel can certainly agree that good design takes time. And a lot of times, there's just so much pressure nowadays in construction that we squeeze everything, right? We squeeze the construction duration, we squeeze the design duration, we try and squeeze the permit duration. Like all these things are compounding to try and deliver projects faster and faster and faster. And what we've seen is there's a degradation of quality that's inevitable with shrinking timelines, right? And so that's the biggest thing for us is, from our perspective, at the end of the day, we're kind of the ones that are doing the install. Our field electricians are the ones that are actually out there turning the screws. And the better the design, the more efficient they operate, right? If there's more thought and there's more, intentional design put up front, like designing that judge's wall and that detail, providing that detail on the drawings, that goes into everything that it takes to build the projects. And so, how we can solve that is difficult, right? We talk about collaboration, we talk about kind of co-location, team building. There's all these buzzwords that are thrown out there, but I think the root of all that is just it takes time to do good design and to allocate the appropriate amount of time for those things, and then also to honor, right, the timelines and commitments that you've made. So if I say that I'm going to be done by this date, there's other people that are codependent on those things that I'm producing, right? Mechanical, electrical, those are great examples of, electrical design is so dependent load, especially on mechanical. And when we don't have those cut sheets, when we don't have a good equipment schedule, it's really difficult to say, yeah, the service size of the building is correct or not correct, right? And so there's a certain flow that I think, you do enough design build, design assist, design in general, you start to understand. And when those timelines start to slip, when you miss a week here, you miss a week here, it starts to snowball pretty quickly. So it goes back to, I think, just that time component. So.
Well, speaking of time, that leads us into our next question is, at what stage of the project should you be involved ideally? And I'm just going to start with you, Paul. And
Sure.
I guess some of it depends on the delivery system, right?
Yeah, in a way. I mean, I'd say, at least from our perspective as the contractor, it is kind of the same in a way. So really that end of SD point for us as a contractor to be brought on is ideal for us. And that's because there's still enough flexibility in the project as it progresses through the DD phases that we can affect change, right? When we get brought on at the CD level, it's so difficult to make any major changes to the project because all things, again, are codependent. And so it's really difficult for us to have any effect to actually put ourselves into the project and, and save the project money or make the project more efficient or improve on schedule. Those things are really kind of baked at 100% CD level. So bringing us in at the DD level allows us to provide input into, sizing of rooms, like big picture items. And it's before we really get into the nitty gritty of placing every device, what circuit is it going to be on, the wiring components, that kind of thing. And so once we can get those boxes kind of built during the DD stage, as we progress into the CD stage, that's kind of typically how I define it, is that's really our time to really do our work, right? That's when the architects kind of have the structure of the building, the walls aren't moving. And that way, when we get in there and start modeling our devices, running our conduit, placing our blockouts, et cetera, that isn't going to shift on us, right? And so that really, from a definition between DDs and CDs, that's probably the biggest thing. So bringing us in at the end of SD level is ideal from a contractor perspective.
Okay, so Chris, who's our architect, who in theory is starting the project with the owner, how do you feel about when people should be brought in?
The earlier the better. I think there are some projects, at least kind of speaking from the projects that I've worked on, where we've both been good and bad at it. But what I've found is that the earlier you can bring everybody in, the better it'll just be for the project in general. Even if that means getting lighting, electrical, structural, mechanical just in the room in the SD pre-design phase, you'll have a much more better awareness of how much space you should allocate for mechanical spaces. How big does the electrical room need to be? Where should we be setting the structural grids? And I think kind of working with the integrated team earlier on only sets up the project for much more success when you get further down the road. And so as early as you can, I think is ideal for any and all disciplines.
And Sammy, what about you? Does interiors get pulled in early?
It depends on the extent of interior scope for the project. I mean, ideally, we would love to be involved early on in the pre-design and initial programming phase so that we can join discussions with the client about their programmatic needs and understand the project context and users. It depends. We tend to be included a little bit later, more in like the design development phase. And this is on different projects, it can be different. I'm currently on a project where interiors didn't join the team until 75% through construction documents for sort of a massive interior overhaul and redesign. And they didn't have any interiors before that point. So this is super late to jump in, but we got it done and kind of did a full design development construction document phase pretty quickly. And I think that we were able to drastically improve the user experience within the building, but
That's
I would like
good.
to be earlier always.
And I know what I'm gonna hit Kayleen next. I know what her answer is as a fellow lighting designer, the earlier the better, but go ahead.
Yeah,
Kayleen.
yeah.
Go.
At the very beginning, I think for me, a lot like interiors, I want to see what the dream is, right? Because then all the way through, I can keep that in mind and really help. It helps to focus what I'm looking at. It helps to focus everyone else too. If we just at least even see what the big idea is and what a hero in a space wants to be, let's say. And then it helps for lighting design, especially, you know, where you're going to spend a lot of time trying to make something really beautiful, or you'll know what it is that you can sort of set on the burner, let's say, and come to later, and how you allocate your time as it goes on. I love to know what's kicking around in everyone's heads in terms of the big idea at the beginning.
So, and Alec, for election here, always seems like and the mechanical that you all have like you on the same day. Docs or docs. You us do our work. You want to
Yeah,
be
Eileen,
brought in.
you're breaking
You
up a little bit
wanna-
for me. Are you guys hearing that as well?
My internet, sorry,
Oh,
but I was
apologies. I'm hearing maybe every third word.
I don't know that. My but go ahead. Why I'm gonna mute and tell you think you should be brought in, deal with when you need information from mates.
Oh, well, I think I heard a question there. When do you need information from teammates? You know, from an engineering perspective, I'm not too far removed from interiors or lighting or architecture. The earlier, the better is the short answer there. You know, and speaking from Kayleen's perspective as well, just knowing the values of a project or the end goal is useful for us too, even though our systems end up hidden behind finishes. It's still nice to know what the project needs to achieve at the end of the day, even if those seem a little bit removed from our technical engineering goals. So I think that's the quick answer there is, yeah, early as possible. You know, a quick anecdote too, we were brought in to look at a youth juvenile facility for a remodel. And fortuitously, the engineering team was on the project, even before schematic design, just as we were trying to identify project goals. And as luck would have it, we found a couple of major issues with the power distribution system in that facility. And I think it's an unfortunate outcome, but I think it was the best possible outcome is those issues with electrical infrastructure killed the project. Had we gone through design and then got a contractor on board, and this is probably a horror story Paul's run across before too, but onboarded contractors, gotten through design, ready for permitting, and then realized that there was a critical issue with the infrastructure, things would have been all the worse. So I think involving as many people as early as possible is just going to be a good thing.
Right, yeah, I can't agree more.
Yeah.
So are you hearing me any better? Okay, I plugged power in. Yeah, unplug, replug.
It'll happen.
So what is the ideal way to capture revisions? And I'm going to start with Chris.
I think kind of putting it generally, just similar themes that we've been talking about as it relates to communication and just making sure that you're tracking things along the way. I know like Sammy was talking about the courtroom specifically within the courthouse, and there was some back and forth about some design options for what kind of material we were going to go with, and to make sure that everyone's on the same page with what those decisions are, just including everybody that needs to be included within those conversations so that when the time comes to review things through the CA process, those revisions are clear and communicated with everybody and everyone's in sync about what's happened.
And Alex, what about you? How do you capture those revisions and keep track of what's happening and who you need info from? That's,
Well, I think, to echo Chris's point and to extend a little bit further, and probably everybody on the line here, I mean, the basic way we do this, we're all working in BIM, we use Revit. That's how we track most of our drawing changes. It's just what we have available to us. What I find really valuable, especially once, we're getting toward the end of CA or even midway through a really long project construction, it's nice to have something in addition to that, because you can just look at a drawing 6 months later and say, okay, we moved a widget or we changed a rating. It's why is really what I think it keeps coming down to for me. So one thing that I found really valuable is, along with those revisions, have some kind of breadcrumb, really. One thing that we've done on, Benton County is just tracked our changes in narrative form. So for every revision number, there's a quick little narrative that I can go back to and say, what did we change and why? And I think that really benefits our contractors too. Is why are we changing something for you, or why are we making you guys redo something that might already be built too, right? Because there's always a good reason. We don't do that stuff willy-nilly. And I've also found that stuff really valuable to come back to toward the end of a project. Why, again, did we move a widget? Oh, it's right there in the narrative. We crashed into a beam or something like that. It's sometimes it can be that easy. And I feel like our owners respect that as well too. It seems like sometimes a big design team is doing all kinds of inscrutable things. Having something to point to real quick, just to say, hey, this added value to your project because of X is a little bit of value as well.
I like the adding the why to the narrative, not just we deleted these lights, added those.
Yeah.
But why that happened. So what makes something, speaking of revisions, what makes it a change order? And I'm gonna ask, well, I have you as my first person to ask. When do you say, stop, this is a new scope for us?
If it affects time or money. Yeah. I think that's what I keep coming down to. I don't think there's any other factor. Paul might disagree on the contractor side, but yeah, time and money. I think that's my short answer.
And Megan, what do you think as a rep? When do you see that affect you?
Alex really nailed that on the head. That was such a good way to say that. Is such a good summary. But yeah, we see the change orders come through. We're typically the last to hear about it, and we don't typically get the why, how or when. So it's generally a bit of a fire drill when it comes our way. And then, of course, pricing is never fun, but it's always part of a change order. It's always the tougher conversations of the project, but I did have a fun little antidote just to like put it into a kind of quick summary. Was thinking if a owner was saying, hey, I want silver finishes on everything all the way through the project, and then they saw a fun video and realized that brushed brass was trending and they wanted a finish change, behold, the change order ensues. But yeah, we don't hear about those till late, but yeah.
I hope that hasn't happened, but I'm gonna, I'm gonna shoot this to Sammy, because that sounds like something that would happen to her. When does something become a change order for you?
Oh my goodness. Change orders are kind of inevitable for interiors and kind of hard to anticipate. But just like Alex said, anything that alters work, time, pricing, usually for interiors, it's maybe removing scope due to budget problems, removing finishes. That happens all the time. So a lot of things, yeah, there's a lot of change orders for interiors. Bane of my
Interesting.
existence.
So while we have Megan here, this happens, I know it happens for lighting and maybe it happens for other people, is how do you handle interaction with reps when you're sitting, like Kaylin sits in Portland, she's working on a project right now in Rockford, Illinois. You're her local rep, she's dealing with maybe a rep there regionally. How do you manage specifying out of one office, designer in another office, rep in a third, and everyone getting their spec credit, and then you have a problem. Who do you go to?
Yeah, that's a very good and complex question. And I want to start with a couple of questions ago, because it really ties in, is like, when should people be involved? Ideally, it's awesome on a project when the rep is involved from day one. We see the vision, we know what everybody's thinking, and then we kind of carry throughout the process, right? Like, we talk with all sides. So it's really helpful when we have that kind of information. Of course, it muddies the waters when people are in different places, but it happens. You guys do it all day long, and I don't know how you keep things straight. But really, it's I kind of go back to the communication thing, like staying open, honest. Should we be doing this? Who should we be talking to? We're always happy to help our local friends, of course, if they need a quick spec sheet on something, or if they don't understand something. We try to be that technical service provider and be the experts in the lights that we take care of. So we always want to help answer those questions, but then, it does get messy. Did we help specify it, or did we just answer a question? Does it go out of territory? And then distribution gets chosen in different territories, and how do you decide who's quoting what and where it's actually going to land? And actually, even as recent as this week, we have come across this twice on the rep side, a little peek into our world. We have found that we have overlapping territories with other rep agencies with the same manufacturers. Of course, that's things that we'll take care of and we'll figure out, but it's just things that you don't know until it comes up, and everybody's trying to do the same thing and provide the service, and then people are pointing fingers, trying to figure out what's going on. And yeah, that communication thing. And if I don't know the answer, let's figure it out together.
And Kayleen, I know I didn't tag you on this question, but have you had some experience with dealing with reps in territory, out of territory?
Yeah, a lot. It is a very complex situation for sure. I mean, I think I can speak for, at least in Oregon, we love our reps. Like we know them, we trust them. we really value what they bring to our teams. And so, like, for me, I feel like honoring them back is to always include them in a Luminaire schedule that goes out, that I know that I've asked them a question, even if I didn't send the name of a project through on the question. I just feel like it's sort of an honor system that's important to maintain because of our relationships with our local reps who we really, really like. But then getting to know the reps in a different location is difficult, but also important, because like here I am in Illinois, we had to have something show up here. You have to forge that relationship with those folks too. So, how they take care of all of that on the back end is their business. But I just think being open and honest with our local reps about what is happening. If they haven't seen a list of projects come through for a while that Kayleen is working on, that's on me too, to communicate to them. And I want them to understand, like, yes, I'm putting your product on here and here's the schedule, kind of thing. So it's a very interesting little debacle, I think.
Yeah. And I think, as those of us who are lighting designers on the call, is to remember when you send out that CD package to send your reps that fixture schedule on your title block so that they can at least register it, even if it is going to be out of territory, they can get some spec credit and be there when you ask them a question. So is there a tool? So I'm going to start with Kayleen, that helps facilitate communication with other team members, or
That's all over the place for me. I think using interior heavy projects, I think Mural has been really kind of moved to the forefront of how folks communicate. Not only does Mural have the ideas, and maybe there's the SD package and the conversation of what's happening, but also then the schedule also starts showing up on there. So for me lately, Mural has been one of the best communicators, as well as Outlook invites to deadlines. I think even if I don't really know what's happening, if I see an Outlook deadline coming, oh, it's just heaven to have that. So for me, I mean, because, as lighting designers, I have like 20 projects I'm on at the same time. I'm going to miss something if I don't have. So that for me, I would say those two things are the big ones right now.
yeah, I live and breathe by Outlook calendar invites. I calendar everything, as AJ will tell you. And Chris, do you have a preferred way of communicating, and do you have Teams chats and all of that, or?
Yeah, I think everything Kayleen said is basically the tools that I use as well. I think Mural has become a really good tool for a lot of projects that people are working with others that are maybe out of region or the office. So it kind of provides at least a space for everybody to come together and feel like they can voice what their opinions are. Teams is tricky because there's Teams chats, there's Teams channels, there's different group chats for different projects, and each project has 5 different group chats for everyone. I think all of that is good as long as you kind of make sure that you're transparent in what you're putting in each chat, and all of those have a purpose. And so not forgetting to tell everybody something that might need to be communicated across the entire team, when you might just be putting it in, like Sammy and I are in a chat with just the architects and interior designers, but we also need to make sure that we're putting that same communication sometimes with Kayleen and Alex and some of the other engineers we work with.
Yeah, I agree, because some of those little chats, you don't have really a record and you're like, where did I remember seeing that somewhere, and you're like going through your 50 chats. Sammy, do you have any further ideas on?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of holding sort of visioning workshops with the client, stakeholders, and sometimes even members of the community. I think this really helps everyone involved have a voice in the design and kind of make sure that we are hearing and incorporating user needs into the program. I like for it to be informal, with like a series of question answer, sticky notes, and this can also be done on Mural. Like Kayleen said, we love Mural. Maybe mood board exercises, and kind of having it informal with the guided exercises helps everyone to be engaged and participate. And I like to do this a couple times throughout the project.
Is anyone a OneNote fan? I have stacks of OneNote. It's kind of like virtual binders. I used to be that person that had a binder for every job. So I really like OneNote, and because you can share notes and all of that with everyone else. All right. Anyone else have a tool or a software that they like to help with communication? Going once. All right, we're going to move on to a fun question, the VE process. I'm going to start with Paul, and tell us how you feel about VE. And
So VE is just, I mean, it's a very overused term. A lot of times all it means is cutting the budget, to be frank. But, for us, at least for me, I guess, I try to change the narrative a little bit. And I've tried to make design changes that might be cost neutral, and also kind of address those as VEs. And a lot of times too, if we make a change on the electrical side, it's not immediately apparent what impact that has on some other systems as well, which could also make it, it might be a big savings on our end and make it a cost neutral once mechanical prices their changes as well. And that's really important. But overall, I mean, our kind of philosophy when it comes to that kind of stuff is we really just see ourselves as kind of I guess stewards of the owner's kind of budget, right? Stewards of their money really is what it comes down to. And it's not for us to say what is a wise decision versus an unwise decision, because that's the owner's decision. And so, the way we look at it is we like to just present them all the options. We'll give them a recommendation saying, hey, industry standard is this, or, we think this is going to add a lot of cost to the project, so we wouldn't recommend it. And let them make the decision, because at the end of the day, it's not our money, right? It's not me writing the check. It's it's the owner. It's them that really get to make that decision. So we try not to get ahead of ourselves and make decisions for them in that regard.
And Chris, as the architect, and you're really the ear of the client, how do you feel? Is it now just part of the process? Like, we know as soon as we finish CDs, we're going to have a VE segment.
Yeah, I feel like it gets talked about as if we're just assuming that it's going to be part of the process now, which is definitely like the case for most projects. You're going to have to kind of come to the table as a team and figure things out together. I think the thing that sets the VE process apart successfully versus unsuccessfully is when you make sure that I might be the architect and I'm hearing from the client firsthand of things, or the contractor what they might want to VE, but there are aspects of the design that I didn't author. And so making sure that you're bringing everybody within the team to the table to kind of discuss it holistically, as opposed to kind of just making that autonomous decision, but getting the opinions from everybody else so that they can kind of have that thing that they may have fought for during the design process, and be able to weigh in on that decision.
Right. I'm going to move forward since we're not running out of time, but so how do you keep up with technology? So I'm going to start with, I think, Alex on this, like keeping up with controls and code cycles, and what's your secret sauce for keeping up with everything?
That's hard these days. I think I do a couple of things. One, I think it's just keeping an open mind, seeing what comes my way, being curious helps. We've also had on a few projects just good opportunities to say, oh, that's a new system or that's a new widget. Let's give it a try and see how it lands. So being a little bit open-minded, again, just to reiterate that, I think that helps. but honestly, I can't really think of anything else concrete for you. It's I think just being curious. You know, we're lucky on the engineering side, and I think some of those of you with NC IDQs or LCs have to do continuing education, but that helps. I think it's a little bit of a crutch. But really, I think at the end of the day, if something comes my way that seems intriguing, and there's usually an opportunity to see how it plays.
Aileen, do you have a method
Um,
or?
I don't. I think it is, you know, we learn a lot from our rep visits, I would say. And of course, IES and wild trainings and things that we offer. I think it really does boil down to your level of curiosity for things, because you sure can just stick with what you know, and stick with what you know 20 years ago too. But I think to stay current and contemporary and have the best systems in place, you do have to remain curious and interested.
So I still have I have like a rep notebook that I, you know, write down when they come to visit. I write it all down and I want to figure out an electronic way of doing that, but I'm still doing it the old fashioned, writing it down. All right. So I'm gonna ask, what are the people who are not lighting designers? What do you want us to know? How can we make your life easier, better? I'm gonna start with Paul.
You know, my approach to this question was a little bit different. But in the context of kind of how you framed it, you know, I'd say a lot of what happened on Benton County was, like I said, that mutual level of respect, right? And one of the things that we did on Benton County that I thought was very successful, and it really kind of set that up, was we had a meeting prior to starting any VE process, with the stakeholders, with the design team, and kind of went through, okay, what areas of the building, because you know we're not privy to the SD, we're not privy to all that stuff being brought on later in the process. But like, what are the pieces of this project that are the heart and soul of the job, right? What's the look you want to go for? What's the, you know, is this decorative fixture, you know, is this the one? Should we even look at VEing this, you know? And that way we're not wasting everybody's time, and we're also paying homage to the efforts, right, that the design team has put in thus far throughout the entire process, right? It seems a little unfair for us to just come in and you know, say, hey, that's, you know, that's a $500 fixture, here's a $20 replacement, you know what I mean? It's just disingenuous to the project. It really doesn't honor the time and effort that's been put in by the design team. So I feel like that really, you know, getting that meeting set up and just kind of laying the groundwork for that was really helpful. So I had kind of interpreted the question a little bit differently, but I do want to throw this out there because I do think it's really important. And it is a little bit preaching to the choir when it comes to, I'm sure, this group, but the attitude that we bring to any project, to work in general, right? That is so important. That whole perception is reality kind of buzz that they throw out there, and it's so relevant right now, especially to the markets that I work in, which is primarily Portland Metro and Seattle. The kind of the national media, the press likes to be on a negative cycle, and it's impacting the amount of development that's happening in these regions. And I think most of us that live in these regions, they know that, you know, it's safe to go downtown Portland. There's a lot of food, you know, it's a great culture. There's a great scene and a great energy that comes from downtown Portland, but that's just lost, right? And it's lost when they start talking about all the things that are happening down there. But maintaining that positive attitude and projecting that outside of our circles, I think is just so critical. And that really, I think, because what we're seeing right now is just a kind of a mass exodus, honestly, for the downtown area because of that. And to rejuvenate that and re-energize the development down there is so critical to our business, our infrastructure, and really what we love to do, which is build things, right? That's why we're all here. And so I think that's just really important. I just want to put that out there that, you know, I want everybody to try and have that positive attitude and just encourage development, right? So anyway, that's my, I'll get off my podium.
I love it. I think we all these days all need to be reminded to try to have a positive attitude. All right, Chris, how can we make your life easier?
I think Paul hit a lot of good points. I don't think I have too much to add in terms of anything additional other than I think just continuing to come into offices. I think lunch and learns are a valuable way that we can learn, and then kind of whoever you end up reaching out to, whether you're a rep or someone that wants to just come into an office to kind of educate them on things, making sure that that invite gets extended beyond maybe the target audience that you're looking at. Because I think we all could use a lot of valuable information that can sometimes be said in those sessions.
Cool. That's a good point. And Sammy, how can we make your life easier, better?
Would say just keep up consistent communication and fold into the design process in order to offer options during the design phase and then alternates during VE. So sometimes I just don't know all that's out there and I can kind of get bogged down with decision paralysis. So this is where I would love to lean on reps and your vast knowledge.
Cool. All right. Do we think well, so maybe I'm going to, oh, we have a question about, we're not talking about the role of the distributor. And this is often a place where conflict originates. How are teams working to keep that transparent in the process? About distributors. So, in the lighting world, how lighting gets from point A to point B is very complicated and convoluted, and maybe Megan can maybe give us a little insight into the role of the distributor.
Yes, thank you, Eileen. I'm so glad that Zach asked this because the distribution are our closest partner, dare I say, direct partner, right? They're the in-between between Paul and myself. We work together with them. They help us through issues and challenges and celebrate the wins with us too. We do everything we can to keep communication flowing back to distribution when we have it with the designers, with the contractors, whatever stage, because like I said, the rep, ultimately, we're there from start to finish, and we really need to play that role of connecting every party and keeping that communication open. And I have been fully guilty of it in my time of running down a path, having a great conversation with the design team or with a contractor, and then saying, oh, I forgot, I have to let the distributor know. And then of course they only get 10% of the story at best, right? Because if you're just not in the conversation, you just don't get the full benefit. So keeping them in the loop is very, very important. And I'm so glad you brought that up, Zach. Thank you.
All right. Well, Sammy is about to leave us. I'm going to share my last slide. I want to thank everyone who joined, all our panelists, and just want to, we have a couple of events coming up in Seattle. There's our lighting slams. This is Wild ILDIS. If you're in Seattle, come join us, sign up to be a presenter. If you haven't done a slam, it's 20 slides, 20 seconds a slide, super fun format. Kaylin, are there some Wild Portland events you wanna?
We just had a combined event, but we don't have April slotted yet.
Okay, so April, we have two events in April. April 24th, we are doing a Wild West event with a woman who does time management, and she has a great podcast. And so her presentation is called Get a Game Plan, Steps to Designing Your Winning Week. And AJ put a link to sign up in the chat, and it's also at lunch. So in a month we're doing that, and it should be a really great. I've been coordinating with her and talking to her and listening to her podcast, and so totally recommend that everybody join us for that. Do we have any final questions, statements? AJ, do you want to say anything else before we,
I want to
off?
thank the panelists once again. It is truly amazing that you guys can all come together in a single room so that we can all chat about this. We do not get together in one room often enough, nowhere near close to it. So really appreciate you guys taking the time to talk with us. Yeah, and as Elaine was saying, we would love to see our local Seattleites and also anyone who's in the area and maybe wants to come up to Seattle and travel to see you at our lighting slam, and then of course the webinar in April.
And if you're not
And
on,
that is
yeah, so if you're not on the Wild mailing list, you can go to Wild National and click, Portland, Seattle. You can sign up for all the whatever towns you are in and get those mailing lists, get those announcements. So, all right, and we had a great turnout, so I appreciate everybody being here. And I guess if we have no more issues, no more topics, I'll give everyone a few minutes back and go grab some lunch and get back to work. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you for all the
Thank you.
participants.
thank you.
Thanks, Eileen.
Thanks, everyone.
For organizing. This was great.
Good.